Yes, a real change in fashion. Actually, I think Margiela has been the last revolution we had in fashion.
It was way ahead of his time. The show, the format, the clothes, the ideas behind it. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of the most influential designers of the last 30 years, without a question.
It never tried to please, but it was pleasing because of that.
Yeah, he's in the top 10 back to the end of the 19th century, for sure.
Des moments où, si vous voulez, évidemment, il y a eu l'effet, de ses vêtements, de son style, qui a fait un choc, mais il y a eu aussi le fait qu'il ne se montrait pas, donc qui est-ce, etc., le mystère, etc. Qui va pouvoir réussir à le faire sortir de sa coquille? Et jamais il l'a fait. Jamais. Jamais il ne s'est montré. Ça, c'est une force extraordinaire.
Yes, that was very smart, not to want to be seen. I think it came from the heart, so I don't think it was a strategy.
It brought up a huge mystery. At the beginning, I thought, he's not gonna continue. He's making it, but at one point he's gonna say, okay, here I am. And he never did.
I don't like the idea of being a celebrity. Anonymity is very important to me, and it balances me that I am like everybody else. I always wanted to have my name linked to the product I created, not to the face I have.
The 80s was a crazy period of excess and fun, very frivolous fashion, big shapes and very hourglass shapes, Thierry Mugler, Montana, and so on. Fashion shows were events with 60, 75 minutes. It was crazy. Then we drifted into the early 90s, and that became a period of much more of reflection. First time we really thought about the ecology as a real problem, a real economic crisis. People suddenly wanted to have honesty. People were wearing non-dyed garments, whites, ecrus, and so it became a period which was appropriate for his philosophy.
My first theme was a surrealistic eye in the ateliers of couture. So it was a spring-summer collection, and the inspiration was the surrealists, of course. There was this veiled face. my love for historical fashion and accessories brought me to an accessory which is called the jabot. I wanted shoulder pads because fashion then was very wide. So that was my first idea of having tiny shoulder pads put more to the neck that the natural shoulder would pop out beside. And that became my first jacket. And I did not want short. Everything was short then. So I made an ankle-length skirt with a huge split in the back, which I would do like, I think, 5 seasons later on. For me, in a silhouette, the two most important details are the shoulder and the shoe. Everything in between, I fill up. I think the shoulder gives you a certain attitude, and the shoes, of course, give you a certain movement. And when a certain silhouette moves in a certain way, I'm very happy. You can imagine the stress when you want to create a shoe as never seen before. You go a little bit crazy. Then my memory went back to the day we went to Tokyo for the first time, when we have seen street workers in their flat cotton tabby shoes. I thought, okay, why shouldn't I do like a soft tabby shoe but on a high heel? And then the idea was born.
Avec Rei Kawakubo, seule femme parmi les samouraïs, on atteint le plus extrême. Une démarche proche de la révolte contre un certain impérialisme de la mode française dans le monde entier.
Everything we had before, we admired, it was gone, it was past. Future was this. The looks of their showrooms, their shops, they had catalogs we never seen before. The models were made up in a certain way, and it went so far that there was even a way of walking, and that, I think, is very strong. I met Jenny in one of her amazing shops in Brussels, and we very soon became friends because there was really an understanding of aesthetics. And of course, we both had that craze for the Japanese designers, which was very intense. And we were ready to go on the adventure together. To present the extreme fashion I had in mind, I thought that it was very important to show it in a kind of universe. It had to be constructed around the color. In the late 80s, most of the showrooms and shops would be in grey concrete with black design furniture. And I started thinking how to be different. So I came up with a different color, and the color would be white. Since there was no budget at our start, I would find junk furniture in the street or at Salvation Army. When it had an interesting design, it would be painted, otherwise it was covered in white cotton.
you know, they said, we're going to paint everything white. And I was like, yeah, that seems like a good idea because it needs a little refresh. And then, you know, you come in and then when they say we're going to paint everything white, they painted everything white. The phones, the TVs, the desks, the walls, everything was painted white and covered in white cotton, you know, and that was the way they did it. And you looked and like, oh my God, it looks so good. You didn't know what was underneath. It was just painted white and it was beautiful.
The white blouse, which became the Margiela uniform, came just by seeing all these pictures and images of models wearing the white blouses in high fashion houses. We came out of a period where people would enter a shop and look to the labels. They would grab the garment and say, oh, this is him or her. I thought, oh, I really don't like that idea. And yeah, there we went. It took years before this blank label with 4 stitches was named Maison Martin Margiela.
For many years, all of us that were wearing something from Martin, we had very often someone coming in your back and scratching your back and saying, you have something. And then, oh no, it's normal. It's the stitch of the label. It's Martin Margiela. And nobody knew. And then it became something that you could recognize, the one that had the 4 stitches. That was cool. But at the beginning, it really was something, you know, that people wanted to take away.
I always wanted to do a show in a theater. It's called Café de la Gare, and by then it was still very 70s. We spoke with the guy and he said, oh, fashion, why not? I said, yes, it's our very first show. And he said, oh, then I can tell you something. If it works out, you will become famous. I said, how come? He said, oh, we had very famous people starting here like Gérard Depardieu and Miu Miu. And we said, okay then, let's do it. First tried a veil on a model wearing an outfit, something happened to me. With no face, there was only the garment and the movement of the garment, and I loved that. When you work so long to achieve something, you want people to see it. So I came up with that idea of having the girls walking in red paint before they left the backstage. But that was me with my obsession.
J'avais fait une interview avec une journaliste, je crois du Vogue anglais, qui me faisait une interview, et d'un seul coup je lui ai dit, écoutez, je suis désolé, vous allez venir avec moi, je vais vous emmener au premier défilé de mon ex-assistant, Martin Margiela, vous allez venir le voir, parce que voilà, ça allait être l'heure, je voulais absolument pas le louper, donc je l'avais amené avec moi et tout pour le voir, et je m'attendais à ce que ce soit bien, mais je ne m'attendais pas à que ce soit aussi bien.
Donc on avait envie de tout, on avait envie qu'on vous prête des vêtements, on se sentait belle dès qu'on mettait, et surtout, pas seulement belle, on se sentait différente et moderne. J'ai l'impression que tout ce qu'on mettait de Martin était en train de démoder tout le reste. Voilà.
It was just totally mind-blowing. Just the way the models, you know, came out with the masks and just the silhouette and the shoes. It was, I had never seen anything like that. I don't like the word avant-garde so much, but it had such an edge that I didn't feel at all in fashion. I think it's like when Andy Warhol came out, right? He was like, boom, he just shattered the art world in many ways.
Everybody was beginning to talk a lot about Martin Margiela. There was something very powerful about what he did, and very different also from everything else that was going on. There was something very compelling about what he was doing. I can't explain why. I was very young, I didn't know much about fashion, but there was something very, very attractive about it. We were looking for a place for a photo shoot for, I believe at the time it was ID magazine, and to do a special on Martin Margiela's clothes, whatever. So I took Jenny and Martin there. You know, they were walking around looking at it, and then they said, I think we're going to do the show here. And I was like, the show here? Because at the time you were doing show Cours Carré du Louvre, or, you know, or like within a 5-block radius of Cours Carré du Louvre. You were not doing shows in the 19e or 20e or wherever it was. And it was an open air space, you know, it was like open air, it was like a what do you call that, un terrain vague, you know, with a kid's playground. Show. We were so overwhelmed by it. People were coming with the cars and the limos, you know, not knowing where they were going, a little scared because nobody was like going into this area in Paris at the time. And the focus for Martin and Jenny was very much that the kids had to be there, the families, the neighborhood had to be there. So it was already quite crowded with all the neighborhood.
Every girl was dressed mostly with very light and mostly white items. For the first time also oversized. These oversized tank tops, which were creased under net t-shirts, people called it the new wet look, which was right. When the clothes arrived, I thought it was so exciting to see them out of the plastic that I say, hey, some garments we leave with the plastic cover. The audience was very strange. One half was, I would say, the professionals, was there with open mouth. And then all the others were yelling and clapping and singing, and it became one big experience. But very, very touching. It's the most magical show, I think, of my whole career.
Ça a été vraiment des grandes césures pour l'histoire de la mode contemporaine, notamment à travers ce défilé-là, qui était qui rediscutait des systèmes de la mode, des systèmes de présentation et des allures de la femme. Je pense que depuis Martin Margiela, on n'a pas eu de créateurs qui ont pris ce sédiment qui est parfois la contre-culture. Ça peut être tout la contre-culture, et ça peut être parfois sale, et ça peut être parfois considéré comme pas beau, mais dès que quelqu'un le prend et le met sur un socle, ça devient digne. Et il a fait ça. Et depuis, on ne peut pas dire que quelqu'un a refait ça.
The show was very controversial. I mean, there were like very violent reactions to it, saying it was like the utilization of young, disenfranchised children used as props and, you know, all of that stuff, which was, you know, very, very violently criticized by some media. It was very shocking, you know, to see that some people had received a very different message from it. And I think sometimes the abrupt nature of this business and the abrupt nature of how people reacted to what you do, I think was probably quite hurtful to him at times. And I think that's part of why at some point very early on he decided he was not going to subject himself personally to it and said, I'm not doing interviews, I'm not doing pictures, I'm not doing all this stuff. Because I think you're really contrary to his nature.
Anonymity for me was a kind of protection of my person as a designer, but also as a person. That I could work, and the work was hard, and that I had nothing on my schedule, like all the appointments one can have with press. I'm not against those appointments, but I could not cope with them. They would bring me out of my balance. Sometimes I regret that I had to take this decision to save myself. So I knew I could give more if I felt protected. Your collections need to be very strong, because it's difficult to make a name if they could not put a face on it.
Celui qui avec la griffe qui était là. Alors. Okay.
The first time I saw his collection was at the Salvation Army in Paris, and as I said, I was sitting on a washing machine, and everybody was in a really good mood because they were sitting on different things. It was in a furniture store, and I think I was sort of probably grinning and thinking, this is like really crazy, and not really understanding it, and it took a little bit of time to understand it. There was a kind of, maybe not a challenge in a way. You sort of thought, well, why can't we see him? But then after a while, you sort of accept it because the story he was telling, the shows and the collections were so powerful that you put that aside. Could you imagine having to explain all that? It would be really brutal. He would be destroyed at the end of the day and have to talk, and then have some stupid journalist say, well, I didn't understand. Why did they have hair in their faces? Are you talking that are you anti-women? I think it happens. The dumbest questions get asked. So, yeah. So he did us a favor in a way. He made us think more, you know? He made us be more creative in how we thought about things.